What happened at the White House may change everything. Trump was caught in a moment that is sparking serious debate about his cognitive ability to lead the most powerful country in the world. Strange behavior, vacant stares, and a pattern that can no longer be ignored. Stay until the end because this is a conversation every American needs to have. Drop a like and subscribe to the channel to help us out. Let's get into it. There is a difference between a moment of fatigue and a pattern of behavior that raises serious questions about fitness for the most demanding office in the world. What was captured at this White House event is not trivial, and treating it as such would be a journalistic and civic failure. Donald Trump, upon concluding his public remarks, displayed behavior that analysts and observers have described as disoriented hesitation. He looked around indecisively as though unsure of what to do next. He repeatedly tapped his own right leg, a gesture that has been observed in previous situations of apparent discomfort or disorientation. And he visibly leaned on the podium while scanning the room around him. Now, it is absolutely necessary to be clear. This is not a medical diagnosis. I am not here to play the role of neurologist or psychiatrist. No serious journalist should. But there is an important distinction between a medical diagnosis and legitimate public observation of behavior. And that distinction matters enormously in this debate. A president of the United States operates under constant pressure. Every gesture, every word, every decision carries consequences that affect not just 330 million Americans, but the entire world. The ability to process complex information, respond to crises in real time, maintain narrative coherence, and demonstrate executive control are not excessive demands. They are the minimum requirements for the job. What makes this episode relevant is not the isolated gesture itself. It is the context in which it appears. It is the frequency with which similar scenes have been documented. It is the overlap of this physical behavior with communication patterns that have been the subject of growing analysis by experts in linguistics, behavioral neurology, and political science. A president who taps his own leg while staring blankly after concluding a public address at a televised event in front of national cameras is not just having a bad day. He is giving us information. And our obligation as citizens and as serious press is to process that information honestly, free of partisan agenda and ideological comfort. Refusing to do so is not neutrality, it is negligence. If this were a single, isolated episode, the conversation would be different. We could attribute it to the fatigue of a demanding schedule, to the accumulated stress of a return to power, to any of the reasonable explanations that any human being deserves to receive in isolated situations. But this episode is not isolated. It is embedded within a documented and growing pattern. Over the past several years, observers have recorded shifts in Trump's public vocabulary. The linguistic repertoire he uses in speeches and interviews has become measurably and visibly more limited compared to decades prior. Researchers who have analyzed transcripts of Trump interviews from the 1980s, 1990s, and 2000s in contrast with his current speech have identified reductions in syntactic complexity, in the use of subordinate clauses, and in the thematic cohesion of his remarks. Confusion over the names of close associates, reversals of dates and historical events, factual distortion that goes beyond calculated political exaggeration, abrupt topic shifts mid-sentence without resolving the previous thread, phrases started and abandoned, excessive repetition of trigger phrases as a way of filling gaps in reasoning. These are linguistic and behavioral patterns that, when combined, deserve serious attention. This does not automatically mean incapacity. It means there is a body of observable data that needs to be examined responsibly, not ignored for political convenience, and not amplified in a sensationalist manner. The point of balance is factual analysis, and that is exactly what we are doing here. When verbal disorientation combines with spatial uncertainty, when the same individual displays confusion about what he is saying and about where he is and what he should physically do, the picture that emerges is troubling enough to demand institutional responses, not diplomatic silence. The White House has an obligation to provide transparent medical information about the president's health. This is not an invasion of privacy. It is a constitutionally implied requirement in a system where a single individual has access to the nuclear arsenal, the power of legislative veto, and the ability to direct global foreign policy. Transparency is not a political courtesy. It is a democratic obligation, and demanding it is not an attack on any party. It is a defense of the integrity of the presidential institution. We cannot have this conversation honestly without directly naming the double standard that has contaminated American public debate in recent years. When Joe Biden hesitated, looked in the wrong direction at a public event, or made a significant verbal error, entire sectors of conservative media and Republican Party figures did not hesitate to openly declare that he was cognitively unfit to serve as president. It was not framed as a medical diagnosis. It was a political conclusion presented as established fact. I am not here to defend Biden. I am here to defend intellectual and journalistic consistency. If mental acuity is a legitimate criterion for evaluating presidential fitness, and I believe it is, then that criterion cannot be applied selectively based on partisan preference. It must be applied uniformly with the same rigor to any occupant of the office, regardless of party, ideology, or political popularity. That is the real test of any political commentator who claims to be serious. It is not hard to criticize those you already dislike. The challenge is in applying the same standards to those who have your sympathy or ideological support. There are three possibilities for what we are observing in Trump. The first, it is nothing. It is fatigue, the stress of campaigning and governing, and these moments are being amplified by political opponents who strip them of context. That is possible and must be considered. The second, it is real but isolated fatigue, and it represents no systemic pattern, also possible. The third, something systemic is occurring, a gradual decline that is becoming more visible over time. This possibility, given the context we have documented, cannot be dismissed. None of these three possibilities should be presented as certainty. But the third possibility, given its magnitude, given what would be at stake for the United States and for the world, demands that it be investigated with the utmost seriousness and not ignored out of political convenience or fear of controversy. The office of President of the United States leaves no room for journalistic comfort zones. It leaves no room for omission driven by partisan loyalty. Every American, regardless of how they voted, deserves to know whether the man with his finger closest to the most powerful button on the planet is in full cognitive capacity to wield that power. That is not an opposition question. It is a citizenship question. If this debate matters to you, hit the like button right now. Every like helps this content reach more Americans who deserve access to serious analysis. No cheap sensationalism, no partisan agenda. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss an analysis. And tell me in the comments, do you believe a president's cognitive health should be publicly debated? Where is the line between privacy and institutional transparency? That is the debate that needs to happen, and it starts right here.